My son stopped me from going to the hospital for emergency surgery and forced me to transfer my assets, but he doesn't know. My name is Margaret Ellison. And the night I realized my own son valued my house, my savings, and my jewelry more than my life, something inside me broke, but not in the way he expected. The pain started quietly, like a small knot in my abdomen that I assumed was just indigestion. I had lived through childbirth, through the loss of my husband, through teaching classrooms full of unruly teenagers for decades. Pain was something I could endure. But this pain was different. It was sharp, persistent, and growing stronger each hour, as if a blade were twisting inside me. By the third evening, I couldn't stand up straight without clutching my stomach. I knew something was wrong. Emergency wrong. I was about to pick up the phone to call for an ambulance when Daniel walked in. My only son, 34 years old, broad-shouldered, always carrying himself with an air of entitlement that I used to mistake for confidence. He saw me bent over, my hand pressed against my side, and instead of worry clouding his face, I saw irritation flicker across his eyes. "Mom, you're always so dramatic," he said, tossing his keys onto the kitchen counter. "You probably just ate something bad. Sit down. Rest. You'll be fine." I tried to explain the intensity of the pain, that this wasn't normal, but he waved me off with the impatience of a man brushing crumbs from a table. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, ignoring how my voice trembled. I thought maybe he was just tired from work. Daniel had always been ambitious. Too ambitious, sometimes, but lately, his ambition had turned into recklessness. Failed investments, loans he never mentioned, until creditors called the house, and a growing bitterness that I hadn't yet handed him the family home to make things easier. That night, as I sat hunched in my armchair, I realized his eyes weren't on me. They were on the envelope of property deeds stacked neatly on the desk in the study. The pain intensified after midnight. I tried to stand, to walk toward the phone again, but my legs gave out. I must have made a sound because Daniel appeared in the doorway. "Hospital," I whispered. For a brief moment, I thought I saw fear in his face. But it wasn't fear for me. It was calculation. "You don't need a hospital," he said firmly, almost too quickly. "What you need is to stop stressing over money. Look, Mom. We need to talk. About the house. About your accounts. It's time you make things official." His words chilled me more than the pain did. There I was, gripping the armrest, fighting for breath, and he was talking about paperwork. I wanted to scream at him, demand he call an ambulance, but the pain held my voice hostage. I could only whisper, "Please, Daniel." But instead of reaching for the phone, he sat down across from me, his expression sharpening into something cold. "You're not dying," he said flatly. "You've always been a worrier. But you can't keep holding on to things you won't even use. The house, your savings, they should go to someone who can actually do something with them." Me. My blood ran cold. I suddenly understood. My pain wasn't an inconvenience to him. It was an opportunity. That night, I barely slept. The pain woke me in waves. But so did the realization that my own son might actually prefer. I never made it to the hospital. I clutched my side with one hand, and with the other, I held on to something else. Resolve. If Daniel thought my illness would make me weak, he was wrong. Because even as the pain tore through me, I remembered something he didn't know, a safeguard I had put in place years ago, after watching friends lose everything when their children made selfish choices. A hidden legal document. A secret Daniel couldn't touch, but I stayed silent. For now. I watched him pacing the hallway the next morning, already making phone calls, already circling like a vulture, and I thought, let him think he's winning, because when the time came, he would learn that a mother may bend under pressure, but she does not break. The first 3 days blurred into one long, fevered nightmare of pain, whispers, and paperwork thrust under my nose. He wanted signatures. He wanted deeds. He wanted what wasn't his. But as I signed with a trembling hand pretending to give him everything, I was already writing the first lines of my revenge. And the irony? He thought he had trapped me. But in truth, I was letting him dig his own grave, signature by signature. He didn't know that while he was trying to steal my life, I was preparing to take back control of his. Daniel's voice was smooth that morning, but I could hear the cracks beneath it. He brought me tea lukewarm, bitter, and placed it on the coffee table as though the gesture excused everything he was about to say. "Mom," he began, clearing his throat. "I've been thinking a lot about the future. Our future. You shouldn't have to worry about things like bills, taxes, or assets. I can take care of everything. But for that to happen, I need you to make things official." His words slithered across the room, mingling with the scent of stale whiskey from the glass he'd abandoned the night before. My stomach twisted, not only from the pain, but from the way he was looking at me. He wasn't looking at me as his mother. He was looking at me as a possession. A key. "I need a doctor," I whispered. My voice cracked like thin ice underfoot. "Daniel, something is wrong inside me. I feel it." He leaned back in the chair opposite me, arms folded, eyes narrowing in irritation. "You always think the worst, Mom. Always. Do you remember when you thought you had breast cancer? Turned out to be a cyst. When you thought you were having a heart attack? Just acid reflux. You jumped to conclusions, and I can't let you drain money on unnecessary emergencies." The dismissal sliced deeper than the pain in my abdomen. My own son was comparing life-threatening agony to an overreaction. "Daniel." "No," he cut me off, his tone sharp, final. "This isn't about hospitals. This is about you trusting me. You've kept control of everything for far too long. The house, the retirement accounts, even Dad's old insurance payout. It's selfish. What if something happens to you tomorrow? Where would that leave me?" Something inside me snapped. "Where would that leave you?" I hissed, gathering the strength I barely had. "What about me, Daniel? What if something happens to me today?" For a moment, his mask slipped. I saw the flicker of annoyance. No. Of calculation flash across his features. He leaned forward, lowering his voice to a near whisper, the way one speaks before delivering a threat. "You'll be fine. But if you're not, don't you think it's better that your estate is already in my hands? Don't you want me to be secure?" Secure. That was his word. Not safe. Not cared for. Not even loved. Secure. The hours dragged. The pain came in waves, but Daniel's persistence never wavered. Each time I tried to rise, to insist he call an ambulance, he found another way to redirect the conversation back to money. At noon, he placed a manila folder in front of me. "These are just preliminary transfer documents. Nothing complicated. Just signatures to smooth things out. I've already drafted them with a friend from work. He knows what he's doing." I looked at the papers through blurred vision. My hands trembled, both from weakness and disgust. Every line was a chain, every signature a shackle. "You expect me to sign while I'm sick?" I asked. He gave me a thin smile, one that might have been charming if it hadn't been so cruel. "All the more reason to handle it now. Imagine the stress you'll save yourself later. Besides," his eyes hardened, "if you collapse, and it's too late, the state decides where everything goes. You wouldn't want strangers touching what you've worked for, would you?" The manipulation was so sharp it nearly stole my breath. He wasn't asking out of love, he was cornering me with fear. And in that moment, between the stabbing pain in my side and the ache in my chest, I saw the truth. Daniel wasn't just careless. He wasn't just desperate, he was dangerous. That evening, as I sat slumped in the armchair, he pulled up a chair beside me. His voice softened, feigned tenderness, dripping like poisoned honey. "You know I've always been the one by your side, Mom. When Dad passed, who handled the funeral arrangements? When the roof leaked, who called the repairman? I've always been there. But I can't keep doing everything if you won't let me have a say. Don't you trust me?" Trust. The word struck like a cruel joke. I remembered the boy he used to be running through the yard with his toy cars, crying when he scraped his knee, clinging to me when nightmares woke him at night. That boy had trusted me. But the man in front of me was a stranger, one who twisted love into leverage. I pressed a trembling hand against my abdomen, feeling as though I might collapse at any moment. My voice came out hoarse but steady. Daniel, you're asking me to choose between my life and my money. He didn't even flinch. Exactly. Night fell again, and the pain worsened. My skin grew clammy, my breaths shallow. I thought of calling Claire my neighbor, my friend, but Daniel had already begun hovering, keeping the phone out of reach, shadowing me as if I were a prisoner in my own home. At one point, as I staggered toward the bathroom, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes sunken. But beneath the weakness, I saw something else. Resolve. Daniel thought he was winning. He thought I was too frail, too desperate, too naive to resist. But what he didn't know, what he could never know, was that years ago, after watching friends lose their homes to manipulative children, I had prepared for this. I had met with a lawyer. I had created a trust. I had hidden a safeguard so deeply that no amount of bullying or paperwork could undo it. He was asking me to hand him everything, not realizing that I had already locked everything away. He was trying to cage a bird whose wings were already free. The next morning, Daniel returned with more papers. His voice was brisk, businesslike, as though he were discussing an errand instead of my life. "These need your signature too," he said, sliding them across the table. I picked up the pen. My hand shook not from fear, but from the effort of playing my role convincingly. I signed slowly, deliberately, giving him the illusion of victory. "Good," he said, gathering the papers with a satisfied nod. "See? That wasn't so hard." But inside, my heart whispered, "You don't know, Daniel. You don't know that what you're holding is nothing more than smoke. You don't know that the real power isn't on those papers, it's in the document you'll never find." And as I looked at him, smiling faintly despite the pain, I realized something else. The more he believed he had won, the sweeter his downfall would be. That night, when he finally left to take a call in the kitchen, I closed my eyes against the burning in my abdomen and let a plan form. I would survive this. I would get to the hospital, one way or another. And when I did, I would make sure the truth came to light. Because Daniel might have stopped me from seeking help now, but he couldn't stop what was already written, already sealed. And when the time came, I would let him see just how far a mother's strength could reach, even when betrayed by her own blood. Daniel's persistence grew sharper the following day, as if my weakened body had given him permission to tighten the noose. He hovered over me like a watchful guard, every movement of his precise and predatory. I tried to rise from the armchair, but he intercepted me before I could reach the hallway. "Sit," he commanded, guiding me back with a hand that was firm but not caring. "You shouldn't be straining yourself. Just sign these, Mom, and rest. I'll handle everything else." The pain in my abdomen was now constant, no longer coming in waves but gripping me like a vice. Each breath was a battle. Yet somehow, the greater agony was hearing my son speak to me not with love, but with the calculated tone of a man closing a deal. I looked at him, his square jaw, the faint stubble on his face, the expensive watch glinting on his wrist, and wondered how the boy who once drew me shaky Mother's Day cards with crayons had become this. A stranger with my blood, sitting across from me like an enemy. "Daniel," I whispered, "I need help. Real help. Call an ambulance." He shook his head, lips pressed into a thin line. "Not until this is settled. What if you don't come back? What if the hospital keeps you overnight, and something happens? You'd leave everything in limbo. You don't want that, do you?" "Ack." My body trembled with fury and weakness alike. I wanted to shout at him that my life mattered more than papers, more than bank accounts. But my voice faltered, caught in the cage of my throat. That afternoon, he called in a notary. A stranger in a gray suit entered our living room, clipboard in hand, barely glancing at me as though I were already fading into the background. She just needs to sign here, here, and here, Daniel instructed. The notary cleared his throat. Mrs. Ellison, do you understand what you're signing? I stared at the paper. My vision blurred, not only from the fever but from the weight of betrayal. I wanted to scream. I understand that my son is stealing from me while I'm dying in front of him. But instead, I forced my lips into a weak smile. Yes, I murmured. My pen scratched across the paper. Daniel's shoulders relaxed, as though a storm had passed. He didn't notice the way my hand lingered, the faint smirk tugging at the corner of my mouth. Because the truth was, I understood far more than he realized. I knew the documents in front of me meant nothing. He thought he was binding me, but the trust I had created years ago was already the true master of my estate. Everything he was orchestrating now was an empty performance. And so, with each signature, I wasn't giving away power, I was buying time. When the notary left, Daniel poured himself another whiskey, humming under his breath. See, Mom? This is better. No stress, no fighting. You can just rest now. I'll take care of everything. I studied him as he lifted the glass to his lips. His hands didn't shake. His conscience was clear, or perhaps he no longer had one. Daniel, I said softly, what if I don't make it? He paused, glass midair, eyes flicking to mine. For the first time, I thought I might see a trace of fear, but it vanished as quickly as it came. Then you'll know you did the right thing, he replied coolly. The words sank into me like ice. My son, my only son, was already preparing to live in a world without me, not with grief, but with anticipation. That night, I dreamed of my late husband, Robert. He stood at the edge of our old garden, the roses in bloom around him, his voice steady as he used to sound. Don't let him win, Margaret, he said. Don't let him think he has your spirit too. I woke, with tears on my cheeks. The pain was worse, but so was my resolve. Daniel could force my hand. He could keep me from the hospital. He could parade strangers through my home with their clipboards and contracts. But he could not touch the truth I carried within me. He would never own me, no matter what paper he clutched. The next day, Claire came by. She knocked gently, her voice warm through the door. Margaret? I baked you some scones. Thought you might like some company. Before I could answer, Daniel stormed to the door and cracked it open just enough to block her view. She's resting, he said briskly. Not a good time. I heard the hesitation in Claire's voice. But she sounded so weak on the phone yesterday. She's fine, Daniel interrupted. We don't need anything. And with that, he shut the door. My heart ached. I longed to call out, to beg Claire not to leave. But Daniel stood guard like a sentinel, his arms crossed, daring me to try. As night fell, my body felt like it was unraveling. The pain was unbearable, my skin drenched with sweat. I wondered if this was how it ended, not with dignity, not with care, but in a silent living room where my son plotted my inheritance. But even in the haze of fever, a thought pulsed clear and strong. I am not finished. I remembered the documents locked away with my lawyer. I remembered the secret account Claire didn't even know about, the one my husband and I had created decades ago. I remembered the strength I had carried all my life, the strength Daniel had underestimated. And in that moment, I knew I would endure. I would outlast this betrayal. When Daniel returned with yet another set of papers, his eyes gleamed with victory. These are the last ones, Mom. After this, you won't have to worry about a thing. Just sign. And it's all over. I stared at him, my hand trembling over the pen. Yes, I thought. It will be over. But not in the way you believe. I pressed my signature down, each stroke heavy with unspoken defiance. He smiled, gathering the papers like treasure, completely blind to the trap he was building for himself. Because while he thought he was winning, he was only feeding the fire of my resolve. And one day soon, when the truth emerged, that fire would consume him. I looked at my son then, not with fear, but with something colder, something harder. Pity. Pity for the man who thought he could break me. Have you ever been in a situation like this? If you were in this situation, would you forgive or take revenge? Comment below to let us know. Daniel's mood shifted after I signed the last round of papers. He began moving through the house with the swagger of ownership, as though every corner of the home he grew up in now belonged to him. His footsteps echoed differently in the hallways, heavier, more assured, while I sat hunched in my armchair, clutching my abdomen against waves of pain. It would have been easy for an outsider to assume he had won. That his mother, frail and weakened by illness, had finally surrendered everything to her ambitious son. I even let him believe it. I smiled faintly when he thanked me for my trust. I nodded weakly when he promised to take care of things, and I let him pour himself another drink with that smug satisfaction painted across his face. But inside me, beneath the fever and the ache, something far stronger pulsed: defiance. He didn't know that the house he now claimed as his was already placed in an irrevocable trust, immune to his schemes. He didn't know that the bank account he thought he was transferring had long been shifted into a hidden account that only I and my lawyer knew existed. He didn't know that the jewelry he thought he'd pawned years ago was only a fraction of what I still owned. Daniel was so blinded by greed that he couldn't see the truth. And the truth was, I was giving him nothing but paper illusions. That evening, he sat across from me at the dining table, a smirk tugging at his lips. "You'll see, Mom. This is better. You won't have to worry about bills or taxes anymore. I'll handle everything. You can just rest." His words hung in the air like a poisoned lullaby. "Rest," I repeated softly, hiding the bitterness in my voice. "That does sound nice." He mistook my agreement for submission. I watched the tension slide off his shoulders, watched his arrogance swell as he leaned back, sipping his drink like a man celebrating victory. For the first time in days, I let myself laugh, not aloud, but silently, deep in the chambers of my mind. Because there was something oddly liberating about watching him play his role in a drama whose ending I already knew. The pain grew worse as the night dragged on. I could feel my body weakening, my breaths shallow, but I forced myself to stay alert. My life dangled on the edge, but so did Daniel's false sense of triumph. At one point, as he gathered the signed documents into a neat stack, he looked at me with something that almost resembled affection. "You did the right thing, Mom," he said. "I know it wasn't easy for you to let go, but you can trust me. You'll see. Everything will be fine now." I nodded slowly, my lips curving into a faint smile, but inside, my heart whispered, "Everything will be fine, but not for you." The following morning, he called one of his friends, a man I vaguely recognized from his reckless business ventures. I overheard their conversation from the living room. "She signed everything," Daniel boasted. "Yeah, it's basically all mine now. The house, the accounts, finally. I just have to get some things filed, and then it's official." There was a pause, then laughter. Daniel's laughter deep, triumphant, unguarded. It struck me like a knife. The boy who once wept in my arms when his dog died was gone. In his place stood a man who laughed at stealing from his own mother. My chest tightened, not only from the illness but from grief. Grief for the son I had lost, grief for the family I had once imagined. Grief for the illusion of love that had crumbled before me. But grief was quickly replaced by resolve. Let him laugh now, I thought. Soon, his laughter will taste of ash. Later that day, as he busied himself making calls and strutting around the house, I closed my eyes and allowed myself to slip into memory. I remembered the day Robert and I met with the lawyer. He had insisted, after hearing about a colleague whose children had drained her accounts before she even passed, "We have to protect you, Margaret," Robert had said firmly. "I trust Daniel, but life is unpredictable. You deserve security." So we had drawn up the documents, an irrevocable trust, hidden accounts, and a clause that ensured my assets would bypass any immediate transfers until my death was certified by 2 doctors. Robert had even arranged it so that Claire, my trusted neighbor, would be notified in the event of any emergency. Daniel had mocked me back then when I refused to let him help with my finances. "You don't trust me," he'd complained. I had brushed it off with a smile, never revealing the full extent of my caution. Now, as I sat in my chair with pain searing my abdomen, I silently thanked Robert for his foresight. He had given me a weapon, a silent safeguard that Daniel could never undo. That night, Daniel hovered again, his voice low and urgent. "You'll need to transfer the jewelry too, Mom. I know you still have the necklace and the emerald ring. They're worth a fortune. Don't keep them locked up when they could be useful." My lips curved into a weary smile. "Of course, Daniel," I murmured. "Tomorrow, we'll look through the safe." He nodded, satisfied, and left me alone for the night. What he didn't know was that the safe contained only costume pieces, now cheap imitations I had placed there years ago after hearing rumors of his debts. The real jewelry had been moved to a safety deposit box under Claire's name. Daniel would open that safe one day, triumphant, only to find trinkets worth less than the whiskey glass in his hand. The thought carried me into sleep with a faint sense of peace. The following day, as my body grew weaker, I pretended to grow weaker in spirit as well. I let my eyes droop when he spoke, let my voice falter when he asked for promises, let my hands tremble when I signed more meaningless papers. "Don't worry, Daniel," I whispered, forcing a tone of resignation into my words. "I'll leave it all to you." His eyes gleamed. He reached out, briefly squeezing my hand, not with love, but with satisfaction. "Thank you, Mom. You won't regret this." But even in my fevered haze, I wanted to laugh. "Oh, Daniel, you're right. I won't regret this." "You will." By evening, I could barely move. The pain had become unbearable. My skin burned with fever, and each breath felt like a knife. Daniel noticed, of course. He hovered nervously, but not out of worry for me. Out of worry that I might slip away. Before he had filed his precious paperwork. "You'll be fine," he muttered to himself, pacing the room. "You'll be fine. Just a few more days." But I wasn't sure I had a few more days, and that terrifying thought forced me to realize that I couldn't keep playing this game much longer. Yes, I had outwitted him on paper. Yes, I had hidden safeguards that he couldn't touch. But none of it would matter if I didn't survive the night. I needed help. Real help. And the only way I would get it was if I found a way to break free of Daniel's suffocating grasp. So I made a decision, even as the fever blurred my thoughts. Tomorrow, no matter what it cost me, I would act. I would find a way to reach Claire. I would find a way to reach a hospital. Because Daniel might think he had won, but the game wasn't over. Not yet. Not as long as I still had breath. The morning sunlight streamed through the curtains, but instead of bringing warmth, it only highlighted the heaviness in my chest. My body felt like it was unraveling, piece by piece. My skin was pale, clammy, and the throbbing in my abdomen refused to relent. Yet, despite the weakness consuming me, I forced myself to stay alert. Daniel had left early to meet with someone about filings. His departure gave me the first breath of freedom I'd had in days. The house, usually filled with his looming presence, suddenly felt quieter, though not safe. I struggled to stand, gripping the arm of the chair until my knuckles whitened. Each step toward the window was a battle, but I pushed myself forward, determined to catch sight of the one person I could trust. And there she was, Claire, my neighbor, my friend, my quiet anchor. She was kneeling by her rose bushes across the fence, trimming them with careful precision. For a moment, I considered tapping the glass, calling out. But my voice was too weak, and my strength too thin. Instead, I pressed my palm against the window, silently willing her to look up. She didn't. Defeated, I lowered myself back into the chair. But even in that moment of despair, a thought flickered inside me. I have to reach her. When Daniel returned a few hours later, his mood was lighter than I'd seen in weeks. He tossed his jacket over a chair, whistling as he poured himself another drink. Good news, he said, settling in across from me. Everything's moving along. Once these papers are filed, we're golden. The word made bile rise in my throat. I gave him a weak smile, careful not to reveal the storm inside me. That's good, Daniel. I'm glad. He leaned back, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. See, Mom? I told you this would be easier. You just had to trust me. Trust. That cursed word again. I nodded faintly, then feigned a cough. Daniel, could you get me some water? Please? He sighed, but he went. As soon as I heard the faucet running in the kitchen, I grabbed the notepad I kept hidden in the side table drawer. My hand trembled violently, but I managed to scrawl a shaky message. Claire, help me. Daniel won't take me to the hospital. I'm not safe. I folded the note into a small square and slipped it into the pocket of my robe. The moment he left the house again, I promised myself I would find a way to get it to her, but the chance came sooner than I expected. That afternoon, Claire knocked on the door again. I heard her voice float in, warm but edged with concern. Margaret? It's me. I made some soup. You haven't been out in days, I just want to check on you. Before I could respond, Daniel beat me to it. He yanked the door open, blocking her view just as before. She's resting, he said curtly. She doesn't need visitors right now. Daniel, Claire's tone hardened. She sounded so weak when I called. Just let me drop this off. I said no. His voice was sharp, final. The door slammed. But in that split second before it closed, I had slipped the folded note through the crack, letting it flutter to the porch at Claire's feet. I prayed she noticed. Daniel returned, scowling, muttering under his breath about nosy neighbors. He never suspected what I had done. But hours later, as night fell, I heard the faintest rustle against the window. I turned my head, forcing my eyes open despite the fever clouding my vision. There, pressed against the glass, was a piece of paper, Claire's handwriting. I got your note. Hang on. I'll find a way. Relief washed over me like cool water. For the first time in days, I felt less alone. The next morning, Daniel left again, clearly agitated. I've got a meeting. Don't do anything stupid, Mom. Just stay put. The door slammed behind him. Minutes later, there was a soft knock at the back door. My heart leapt. Slowly, painfully, I dragged myself to the kitchen and opened it just a crack. Claire stood there, eyes wide with alarm as she took in my condition. Good Lord, Margaret, she whispered, slipping inside. You look terrible. What has he been doing to you? Tears burned my eyes. He won't let me go to the hospital. He's making me sign everything over. Claire, I think I'm dying. Her hand flew to her mouth. That's it. I'm calling an ambulance right now. No, I rasped, grabbing her wrist with surprising strength. Not yet. If he sees, he'll stop you. You have to wait until he's gone longer. Just promise me you'll help me when the time is right. Claire's eyes brimmed with tears, but she nodded fiercely. Of course. I won't let him do this to you. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Claire left quickly, slipping back out the way she came, but not before pressing my hand in hers. Hold on, Margaret. Just a little longer. I'll get you through this. When Daniel returned, I was back in my chair, feigning weakness. He never suspected that the balance of power had quietly shifted, that I now had an ally, someone watching from the outside. He poured himself another drink, smug as ever, while I sat silently, hiding the faintest smile. That night, I lay awake, listening to the rhythm of Daniel's footsteps in the hall. My body was failing me, yes, but my spirit was sharpening, fueled by the knowledge that Claire knew the truth. Daniel thought he had trapped me. He thought he was moments away from victory. But he didn't know that my neighbor had seen through the cracks. He didn't know that help was circling closer, ready to break through the walls he had built. And as the pain flared through me once again, I whispered into the darkness, "Hold on, Margaret. Just a little longer." He doesn't know the ending of this story yet. The pain in my abdomen had grown unbearable, a constant throb that no amount of shallow breathing or shifting in my chair could dull. It felt as if something inside me was tearing apart, a quiet war in my own body. My forehead burned with fever, sweat beading across my skin. My hands shook uncontrollably. Yet when Daniel entered the room, all he saw was an inconvenience. "Mom," he said sharply, standing in the doorway with his phone in hand, "you're dripping sweat. You need to take better care of yourself." I stared at him, my lips parted in disbelief. Better care of myself? I could barely stand, barely breathe, and he was lecturing me as if I were some careless child. "I need a hospital," I whispered, my voice raw. His jaw tightened. "Number. You don't. You're fine." "Daniel, I can't." "Enough," he snapped, slamming his phone down on the counter. "Do you think hospitals are free? Do you know how much debt people get into for a night in the ER? And you'd expect me to deal with that? Number. We're not going." I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing myself to look him in the eye. "You'd rather see me die here than spend a few dollars?" He froze. The silence stretched between us, thick and damning. His eyes darted away, and in that moment, I knew the truth. It wasn't about the money, it was about control. If I went to the hospital, if doctors intervened, he would lose his grip on me. He needed me weak, confined to this house, pliant enough to keep signing. Later that afternoon, he returned with a box. He placed it on the table, his expression hard but eager. "Open it," he instructed. With trembling hands, I lifted the lid. Inside were files, envelopes, jewelry boxes, the remnants of my life, gathered like spoils. "I went through the safe," he explained. "I know you've been hiding things. The ring, the necklace, they're gone. Where are they?" My heart skipped. He had opened the safe, but as I predicted, all he found were the cheap replicas I had left behind years ago. "They're right there," I said weakly, pointing to the trinkets. He narrowed his eyes. "Don't play games with me, Mom. Those are worthless. Where are the real ones?" I shook my head, feigning confusion. "That's all I have, Daniel." "I'm sorry." His nostrils flared, his voice rising. "Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I don't know you've been hiding money? Hiding jewelry? Hiding everything from me?" My body trembled, but my voice was steady. "If I had hidden things, don't you think it was for a reason?" His face darkened. He leaned in so close I could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Don't test me. You're sick. You're weak. You won't last without me. Stop lying." For the first time, I allowed myself a small, cold smile. "Maybe I won't last, Daniel, but neither will your lies." He recoiled, startled, as if my defiance had burned him. That night, I could barely move. My abdomen burned, my breath shallow and ragged. I knew my body was failing me. Something inside was rupturing, and without help, it would kill me. Yet Daniel sat in the next room, humming to himself, rifling through my papers, sipping his drink like a man waiting for a clock to run out. At one point, he came back into the living room, dropping heavily into the armchair across from me. "Why do you make things so hard?" he muttered, staring into his glass. "If you just trusted me, if you just gave me what I asked for, none of this would be a problem." I closed my eyes, my voice barely audible. "You mean, none of this would be a problem for you?" He didn't respond. He didn't have to. The silence was answer enough. The next morning, I awoke to Claire's voice at the back fence. I couldn't hear her words, only the soft rhythm of her tone as she called to her dog. But the sound gave me strength. Somewhere out there, someone cared whether I lived or died. Daniel, however, was relentless. He paced the kitchen, muttering about filing fees, about property transfers, about accounts he wanted access to. Every word was laced with greed, every glance at me filled with impatience rather than concern. By noon, he returned with yet another stack of papers. "These are just final authorizations," he said, sliding them toward me. "After this, everything's smooth." I forced my trembling hand to take the pen. My vision blurred as I scrawled my name, my body shaking with weakness. "Good," he said, gathering the papers like a prize. "You're finally learning." He turned to leave the room, and in that moment, I whispered to myself, "You have no idea what you've lost already." That evening, as he retreated to his bedroom, I sat in the silence of the living room, clutching my abdomen, fighting the blackness threatening to pull me under. I thought of Robert again, of the day we set up the trust. His voice echoed in my memory. "If he ever tries to take from you, Margaret, this will protect you. No one, not even Daniel, can undo it." I felt tears prick my eyes. Robert had known. He had seen the cracks in Daniel's character, long before I did. And now, his foresight was the only thing keeping me from total ruin. But foresight wouldn't keep me alive, not unless I reached help. The next morning, Claire knocked again, firmer this time. I heard her voice rise, full of concern. "Margaret, I know you're in there. I need to see you." Daniel rushed to the door, snapping it open. "She's sick. Leave her alone." "Then let me help her." Claire's voice was fierce, stronger than I had ever heard it. "You don't need to meddle," Daniel barked. "I'm taking care of her." "If you were taking care of her," Claire shot back, "she'd be at the hospital." Lo. The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, I thought Daniel might lash out, but then the door slammed again. My heart pounded. Claire knew. She wasn't backing down. And neither was I. That night, I lay awake, listening to Daniel's footsteps pacing the floor. He thought he had tightened his grip on me, but every step, every word, every document he shoved in front of me only made his eventual downfall sharper. Because when the truth came, when the trust was revealed, when Claire broke through his control, when the law finally caught up to his cruelty, his entire illusion would crumble. I closed my eyes against the pain, clinging to that thought like a lifeline. He thinks I'm broken. He thinks I'm his prisoner. But the truth is, he's the one trapped in a lie he can't escape. I couldn't tell whether the nights were growing longer, or whether my body was simply losing its grip on time. Fever made the hours blur together, stretching minutes into eternities. My abdomen felt as though it were being torn apart, and yet Daniel's face remained the same, sharp, calculating, impatient. "Mom," he said one evening, sliding yet another paper in front of me. "You still haven't given me access to the retirement accounts. The lawyer says there are penalties if we don't act fast. Just sign this, and we're done." I stared at the paper, my pen trembling in my fingers. But my mind was elsewhere, far away, back to the day Robert and I had first visited Mr. Holden, our lawyer. It was 12 years ago. Robert had been worried. We were sitting across from Holden's polished oak desk, the smell of old books heavy in the air. "You've worked your whole life for this, Margaret," Robert had said, his hand resting over mine. "We need to make sure no one can ever manipulate you, not even family." I had frowned back then, offended. Daniel would never. Robert cut me off gently. "You don't see it yet, but I do. He's impulsive. He wants everything now, without working for it. Someday, that'll come back to us. And when it does, I want you to be protected." Holden nodded gravely. "It's not uncommon. Parents trust. Children exploit. But there are safeguards we can put in place. So we had created it. An irrevocable trust. One that no transfer, no signature, no false witness could undo. The deed to the house, the accounts, even the valuable jewelry had been tucked beneath its umbrella, safe from any greedy hands. Daniel had laughed years later when I brushed off his offers to help with finances. He never knew that the walls around my estate had already been built. Walls he could never climb. I blinked back into the present, Daniel's voice pulling me from memory. "Mom," he barked. "Are you listening? Just sign it already." I forced myself to scrawl my name across the paper, my lips twitching into the faintest smile. He saw compliance. I saw theater. Because the truth was, no matter what I signed, Those accounts were locked so tightly in the trust that not even his lawyer friend could touch them. That night, after Daniel retired to his room with his whiskey, I leaned back in my chair, letting the memory of Robert's voice guide me. Never let him see all your cards, Margaret. Keep something hidden. That way, if the day comes when trust is broken, you'll still stand. I had listened. I had hidden more than one safeguard. The trust was the largest. Yes, but there were smaller secrets too, accounts Daniel didn't know existed. Jewelry pieces he thought I had sold but hadn't. And even a letter with Holden that would automatically trigger if my death certificate ever came under suspicious circumstances. Daniel thought he was holding the strings of a puppet. He didn't realize I had already cut them. The following morning, Claire managed to slip me another note through the back door. My hands shook as I unfolded it. I spoke to someone I trust. If I can't get you out, I'll call for help myself. Just hold on. Margaret. Tears blurred my vision. Claire knew more than I dared to hope. She had become my silent soldier, waiting for the right moment. I tucked the note into the pocket of my robe, pressing it against my heart. Meanwhile, Daniel grew bolder. He paraded through the house like a king, opening drawers, flipping through papers, searching for treasures he thought I still hid. One afternoon, he stormed into the living room, a crumpled piece of paper in his fist. "Where's the other account, Mom?" he demanded. I raised my brows weakly. "What account?" He slammed the paper onto the table. It was an old bank statement, one I had forgotten to shred. "This one. It shows transfers I never saw. Where's the rest of it?" My stomach clenched, not from fear, but from the searing pain still tearing through me. Even so, my voice remained steady. "That was years ago. There's nothing left." His face twisted with fury. "Don't lie to me." I met his gaze, unflinching. "I am not lying." He stared at me for a long moment, then threw the paper aside with a curse. "Fine. But I'll find it. You can't keep secrets from me forever." A quiet smile tugged at my lips. "Yes, I can." That night, I pretended to drift in and out of fevered sleep, while Daniel rifled through the safe again. I heard the clatter of costume jewelry, the muttered curses under his breath, when he realized nothing was valuable. Finally, he slammed the safe shut, stomping down the hall. I exhaled slowly, relief washing over me. He had no idea where the real treasures lay. He had no idea about the safety deposit box under Claire's name, or the hidden compartments Robert had built into the old cedar chest in the attic. Even if I died tomorrow, Daniel would never hold the keys to my life's work. The days blurred, but my mind sharpened with each passing moment. Pain has a way of burning away weakness, leaving only what is essential. And what remained in me was not fear, it was steel. Yes, my body was failing. Yes, my son hovered like a vulture, circling for what he believed would soon be his. But he didn't know. He didn't know that I had already stripped him of power long before he tried to take it. He didn't know that the empire he thought he was seizing was nothing but sand slipping through his fingers. And he didn't know that the longer he delayed my treatment, the more evidence he piled against himself. That night, as I lay in bed clutching my side, I whispered into the darkness, words only meant for myself and for Robert's memory. "Daniel thinks he's the hunter. But really, he's the prey." The pain had grown into something monstrous, no longer sharp stabs or waves, but a constant, crushing agony that stole the air from my lungs. Every breath was shallow, every movement a battle. My body was screaming for help, and still Daniel dismissed it as if it were nothing more than a nuisance. "Stop exaggerating," he muttered when he found me doubled over on the couch. "You just need rest. You're always so dramatic." His words struck me harder than the pain. Dramatic. That's what my life had been reduced to in his eyes. Not illness. Not danger. Not the reality that his mother was unraveling in front of him. Just drama. I looked at him then. Really looked. And I realized something terrifying. He wasn't worried about me at all. He wasn't even pretending anymore. His concern began and ended with the papers stacked neatly on his desk, the ones he believed had secured him a future. But I knew better. I knew those papers were worthless. I knew his imagined victory was nothing more than a shadow. And yet, if I didn't act soon, the truth would die with me. That night, the fever soared higher. My body trembled violently, sweat soaking through my clothes. I clutched my abdomen, certain that something inside me had torn, that my insides were bleeding into themselves. I thought of Robert again, his hand holding mine across the lawyer's desk, his steady voice saying, "You have to protect yourself, Margaret, even from the people you love most." And then I thought of Claire, her note, her promise, her eyes brimming with alarm when she saw me. She was waiting. She was ready. But she couldn't help me, unless I gave her the chance. I realized then that waiting was no longer an option. If I stayed in this house one more day, I might not wake up. And if I didn't wake up, Daniel would never face justice. The next morning, I forced myself out of bed before Daniel stirred. My body screamed in protest, my vision darkening around the edges, but I clung to the wall and shuffled toward the kitchen. I needed the back door. I needed Claire. But before I could reach it, Daniel appeared in the hallway, rubbing his eyes, his face darkening when he saw me upright. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded, rushing to block my path. "You shouldn't be walking. I need air." I croaked. "You don't need air. You need to sit down before you collapse." His hand clamped around my arm, guiding me back to the chair. I wanted to fight. I wanted to scream. But the truth was, my body had no strength left. I sank into the chair, defeated. Daniel crouched in front of me, his tone softening. "You're not thinking straight. You're sick, Mom. Let me handle things. Trust me." That word again, trust. The irony nearly made me laugh. Hours passed. He spent the day on the phone, making calls, bragging to someone about the transfers. I closed my eyes and listened, memorizing every word. Each call was another nail in his coffin, another thread of evidence that would one day trap him. But evidence wouldn't save me if I didn't make it through the night. By evening, the pain had reached a pitch I could no longer endure. I felt faint, my breaths shallow, as if I were slipping away. And that's when something inside me shifted. I was done waiting. Done pretending. Done letting Daniel decide whether I lived or died. I would act. Tonight, when Daniel left the room to take another call, I pulled the notepad from the side table again. My hands shook violently, but I managed to scrawl. "Claire, please. Tonight. I can't wait any longer." I slipped the note beneath the rug near the back door, knowing Claire sometimes peeked in when Daniel wasn't home. It was a gamble, but it was all I had left. Minutes later, Daniel returned, smug as ever. "Talk to my guy. Everything's set. Just a few more steps, and it's all mine." Woo. I forced a faint smile, whispering, "I'm glad." He nodded, satisfied, blind to the fact that my words were a weapon, not surrender. That night, I lay awake, clutching my abdomen, listening to the house settle into silence. Daniel's snores drifted down the hall, thick with alcohol. I waited until I was sure he was asleep, then forced myself up. Each step toward the back door felt like dragging chains, my body trembling under its own weight. When I reached the rug, I dropped to my knees, stifling a groan. With shaking fingers, I pushed the folded note out beneath the crack of the door, praying it would find its way to Claire's feet by morning. Then I crawled back to the chair, collapsing into it with a ragged breath. I closed my eyes, whispering into the darkness, "Please, Robert. Please, Claire. Don't let me die here." The following morning, Daniel was in a foul mood. He paced the kitchen, muttering about delays, about lawyers who didn't understand urgency. "Mom," he barked suddenly, "where's the other paperwork? The one about your pension?" "Don't play dumb, I know there's more." I met his glare with calm eyes. "You already have everything." His hand slammed against the table. Stop lying to me. The sound reverberated through the room, but I didn't flinch. For the first time, I looked at him, not as my son, but as the man who had chosen greed over love. And I realized something. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. That afternoon, when he stepped out for another meeting, I heard the faintest knock at the back door. My heart leapt. I dragged myself to the kitchen, opening it just a sliver. Claire stood there, her eyes filled with urgency. She slipped inside quickly, shutting the door behind her. "I got your note," she whispered. "We're done waiting. Tonight, I'm calling an ambulance whether he likes it or not." Tears filled my eyes. "Thank you," I rasped. She gripped my shoulders, her eyes fierce. "Hold on, Margaret. Just a little longer. We'll get you out of here." I nodded weakly, clinging to her strength like a lifeline. That night, as Daniel retreated to his room, confident in his imagined victory, I sat in the living room, clutching the blanket around me. The pain was unbearable, but my spirit burned brighter than it had in days. Because tonight, I knew the tide would turn. Daniel thought he had trapped me, but he was about to learn what happens when a mother stops being silent. That night, the air in the house felt heavier, thicker as though the walls themselves knew a storm was about to break. I sat in my armchair, the blanket pulled tight around my shoulders, my abdomen screaming with pain so sharp I could barely draw breath. My vision swam in and out of clarity, yet my mind was crystal clear. If something didn't change tonight, I wouldn't live to see the morning. Claire had promised. "Tonight, I'll call an ambulance whether he likes it or not." Those words played on repeat in my head, a lifeline I clung to as Daniel drifted around the house, muttering into his phone about filings and transfers. He was already living in the future he imagined for himself, blind to the fact that his empire was made of smoke. When he finally retreated to his room, shutting the door with a heavy thud, silence fell. My heart pounded in my ears. This was it. The moment. I heard the faint scrape at the back door, 3 short taps, then one long. Our signal. I forced myself up, each movement agony, and shuffled to the kitchen. My trembling hands unlocked the door just enough to reveal Claire's anxious face in the shadows. "Margaret," she whispered urgently, slipping inside. "You're burning up. We have to go now." Tears welled in my eyes. "He'll stop us." "Let him try," she snapped, her voice low but fierce. "I've already called. The ambulance is on its way." The relief was so intense, I nearly collapsed. Claire caught me, her arms steady around my frail body. "You're going to make it," she whispered. "Just hold on." But before I could reply, a door slammed down the hall. Daniel's voice rang out, sharp, suspicious. "What's going on in here?" Claire froze, her grip tightening on me. He stormed into the kitchen, his eyes blazing as he took in the sight, me clinging to Claire, sweat, soaked and trembling, Claire's hand still on the door handle. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he shouted. "I called an ambulance," Claire said firmly, her chin lifting. "She's sick, Daniel. She needs a hospital." His face twisted with fury. "You had no right. This is my house, my mother. Your mother is dying in front of you, and all you care about is paperwork." Claire fired back, her voice shaking the walls. Daniel's fists clenched at his sides. For a moment, I thought he might strike her. But before he could move, the distant wail of sirens cut through the night. The sound pierced the silence, growing louder with each passing second. Daniel's face drained of color, fury giving way to panic. "No," he muttered, shaking his head. "No, no, no, you can't do this. They'll start asking questions. They'll save her life." Claire interrupted coldly. He spun toward me, desperation in his eyes. "Mom, tell them you're fine. Tell them you don't need this. Please." I met his gaze. My voice ragged, but steady. "Daniel, I will not die here for your convenience." His mouth opened, then closed, words failing him for the first time. The siren stopped outside. Moments later, Fists pounded on the front door. "Paramedics," a voice called. Claire rushed to open it, and within seconds, two men in uniforms entered, carrying equipment, their eyes scanning the scene. "She's burning up," Claire said quickly. "Severe abdominal pain for days." He wouldn't let her come in. The paramedics exchanged a glance. One knelt beside me, checking my pulse, while the other began setting up a stretcher. Daniel hovered, his voice trembling. "She doesn't need this. She's exaggerating. She's always like this." "Sir," one paramedic cut him off sharply. "Step back. This is a medical emergency." As they lifted me onto the stretcher, Daniel's face contorted, torn between anger and fear. He leaned close, whispering so only I could hear. "You'll regret this, Mom. Don't do this to me." I looked him dead in the eye, my voice barely a whisper. "No, Daniel. You'll regret this." His face paled, his jaw tightening as they wheeled me toward the door. Claire followed, her hand clasping mine, her eyes fierce with determination. The ambulance ride was a blur of flashing lights and shouted medical terms. I drifted in and out of consciousness, the pain so overwhelming I thought it might consume me. But through it all, one thought remained clear. I was free. For the first time in weeks, I was free of Daniel's suffocating grip. When we arrived at the hospital, doctors swarmed me. Words like ruptured appendix, internal bleeding, and emergency surgery floated above me. Frightening, yet strangely relieving. At least now the pain had a name. At least now something could be done. As they prepped me for surgery, I closed my eyes, whispering a silent prayer of thanks for Claire, for Robert's foresight, for my own stubborn will to survive. Hours later, when I awoke groggy but alive, Claire was at my bedside. She gripped my hand, tears streaming down her face. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. "They said if we'd waited one more day, you might not have made it." Emotion welled in my chest. "Claire, you saved me." She shook her head. You saved yourself, Margaret. You held on." I closed my eyes, letting relief wash over me. But even as I drifted back into sleep, another thought pierced the haze. Daniel, what would he do now that his plan had failed? And how would he react when I revealed the truth, that everything he thought he had stolen was already beyond his reach? I pictured his face when he discovered the trust, when he realized the house, the accounts, the jewelry, all of it were untouchable. And for the first time since the pain began, I smiled, because Daniel thought he had won. But the game was just beginning. How do you think they will react when I reveal that to everyone? The sterile white ceiling of the hospital room was the first thing I saw when I opened my eyes. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. The hum of machines, the faint beeping of a heart monitor, the smell of antiseptic. It all felt strange, foreign. But then the sharp pain in my abdomen reminded me, grounding me to reality. I was alive. Barely, perhaps, but alive. The surgery had saved me. That much was clear from the heaviness in my body, the IV drip feeding into my arm, and the nurse who leaned over me with a warm smile. "Mrs. Ellison, you're awake. You gave us a scare." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, my voice rasping like sandpaper. "How long?" "About 6 hours," she said gently. "Your appendix ruptured. You had severe internal infection. If you'd waited another day." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. I knew. I turned my head and saw Claire in the corner, her face pale but determined. When she saw me stir, she rushed to my side, clasping my hand in hers. "You made it," she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. I was so afraid we were too late. Emotion surged in my chest, threatening to overwhelm me. "Claire, thank you." Her grip tightened. "Don't thank me. Thank yourself. You held on long enough to get here, that was all you." But survival was only the beginning. As the days passed, I drifted in and out of recovery. The infection was severe, and the doctors warned it would take time before my body regained strength. Yet, even in my weakened state, my mind was sharp. I couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. Would he show up here, pretending concern for the benefit of appearances? Would he hover by my bedside with the same fake tenderness he used at home, trying to keep his claws in me? Or would he stay away altogether, too afraid of what questions might be asked? The answer came on the third day. I woke to find him standing at the foot of my bed, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "Mom," he said, his voice low, controlled. "You shouldn't have done that." 1. Claire, seated beside me, stiffened immediately. "She's alive because she did that," she snapped. Daniel shot her a glare, but then turned his attention back to me. "You embarrassed me. You made me look like some kind of monster, to the neighbors, to the paramedics. Do you know what that does to my reputation?" I stared at him, incredulous. My voice was weak, but every word dripped with contempt. "You were willing to let me die for your paperwork. You're worried about your reputation?" His jaw clenched. I was trying to secure our future. "No, Daniel," I said, my tone cutting through the fog of medication. "You were trying to secure your future, at the cost of mine." His mouth opened, but no words came. He spun on his heel and stormed out, the door slamming behind him. Claire exhaled, shaking her head. "That boy, he's beyond saving." I didn't answer, because deep down, I feared she was right. But what Daniel didn't know was that his little performance had only made things easier for me. He had revealed himself, not just to me, but to Claire, to the paramedics, to anyone who had witnessed his fury. There would be no hiding it now. And soon, he would discover the bigger truth. That all his scheming had been for nothing. 2 days later, my lawyer, Mr. Holden, arrived at the hospital. His gray hair was thinner, his steps slower than I remembered, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. He carried a folder under his arm, his expression calm, but purposeful. "Margaret," he said warmly, taking a seat beside me. "I've been informed of your condition. How are you feeling?" "Weak," I admitted, "but alive, thanks to Claire." Claire smiled faintly, squeezing my hand. Holden nodded, then leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I also understand Daniel has been pushing you." I let out a bitter laugh that turned into a cough. "Pushing me straight into the grave." Holden's eyes hardened. "Then it's time he learns the truth." He opened the folder and slid a stack of documents onto my bedside table. "The trust is intact, Margaret. Everything you placed under my care years ago remains untouchable. The house, the accounts, the jewelry, all of it is secured. Whatever he thinks you signed in the past weeks, it has no legal standing. It's meaningless." Relief coursed through me like cool water. "Thank God," I whispered. Holden continued, his tone steady. "What's more, the documents Daniel had you sign will work against him. They demonstrate coercion under duress, especially if paired with witness testimony. Claire's account, the paramedics, even the hospital records showing your condition, it's more than enough to build a case." "Oh," Daniel's furious face flashed in my mind. "So I can stop him?" Holden nodded firmly. "Not only stop him, expose him." That night, as the hospital lights dimmed and the halls quieted, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. For days, I had been Daniel's prisoner, his pawn. But now, with Holden's reassurance, the balance of power had shifted. Daniel thought he had stolen everything. Soon, he would learn he had stolen nothing but his own dignity. I smiled faintly. The first real smile since this nightmare began. Because now I had something I hadn't had before. Leverage. The next time Daniel visited, I was ready. He walked in, trying to mask his irritation with forced charm. "Mom, I just want to make sure you're okay. I'm sorry if I was harsh before." I raised an eyebrow. "Harsh?" He hesitated. "I didn't mean to upset you. I was just stressed." "Stressed?" I echoed, my voice calm but sharp. You nearly killed me. His face faltered. That's not true. Claire heard you. The paramedics heard you. And now my lawyer knows everything. Oh, the color drained from his face. You told Holden? Yes, I said evenly. And you'll soon find out exactly what that means. His mouth opened in protest, but I held up a weak hand, silencing him. Get out, Daniel. I need rest. For once, he obeyed. But the look on his face as he left told me everything. Panic had finally replaced arrogance. And it was only the beginning. The morning after my confrontation with Daniel, the hospital room felt brighter. Perhaps it was the sunlight pouring through the blinds, or perhaps it was the shift inside me, a sense of power returning to my veins. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't simply surviving, I was planning. Claire sat beside me, knitting quietly, but her eyes flicked up every time I shifted. She was still guarding me, watching for any sign of Daniel's intrusion. You look stronger today, she said softly. I feel stronger, I admitted. Not just in my body in here. I tapped my chest, because I know now, he can't touch me. Her lips curved into a smile. Then let's make sure he learns that. Later that day, Mr. Holden returned, bringing with him a younger associate and a briefcase that clicked open with precision. Inside were the documents Daniel had tried to push through the ones I had signed under duress. Margaret, Holden began, we have everything we need. Your signatures here, here, and here are meaningless because they were not notarized properly, and because we can demonstrate coercion. Claire's testimony, combined with your medical records, is more than enough. Legally, Daniel has no claim. The younger associate added. And if he tries to press the issue, we can pursue charges of undue influence, elder abuse, even attempted financial exploitation. The courts don't take kindly to this kind of thing. My chest tightened at those words, elder abuse. How strange it was to hear my life reduced to a term, a category. And yet, how true it was. I closed my eyes, swallowing hard. I never wanted to believe it would come to this. My own son. Holden's voice softened. Margaret, protecting yourself doesn't mean you failed him. It means you've honored yourself. I opened my eyes, resolve solidifying. Then let's do it. File whatever you need to. Make sure he never tries this again. Daniel showed up that evening, swaggering in as though nothing had changed. He carried flowers in one hand, his expression carefully arranged into concern. Mom, he said smoothly. You're looking better. I'm glad. I took the flowers without a word, setting them aside on the tray. He pulled up a chair, leaning close. Listen, about before. I might have pushed too hard. I just wanted to make sure things were secure, you know. For both of us. I met his gaze evenly. Daniel, it's over. Oh. His brow furrowed. What do you mean? I spoke with Holden. The trust is intact. Everything I own is protected. Whatever you thought you gained, you didn't. You have nothing. The mask slipped. His eyes darkened, his jaw tightening. You told Holden? Yes, I said calmly. And I told him everything. For the first time, Daniel was speechless. His lips parted, then closed again. Finally, he spat. You've ruined me. No, Daniel, I said softly. You ruined yourself. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the flowers toppled from the tray. Claire reached over, steadying them, her face grim. That boy won't give up easily, she warned. I know, I whispered. But now I'm ready. The following week became a blur of paperwork and preparation. Holden's team worked swiftly, gathering statements, compiling medical records, securing evidence. Claire gave her testimony in crisp, unwavering detail, recounting how Daniel had blocked me from leaving, how he had dismissed my condition, how he had raged at the idea of an ambulance. The paramedics added their voices too. One of them recalled vividly how Daniel had insisted I didn't need care, how he had tried to stand in their way until they forced him aside. Piece by piece, the case against him was being built. And all the while, I lay in my hospital bed, recovering slowly, letting the knowledge of his unraveling feed my strength. On the 7th day, Daniel returned again. This time, his swagger was gone. His hair was unkempt, his eyes bloodshot, his voice tinged with desperation. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking, "we don't need lawyers. We don't need all this drama. Just drop it, please. I'm your son." The words hit me like a bitter wind. I'm your son. As if blood alone erased betrayal. I looked at him for a long moment, letting the silence weigh heavy between us. Then I said, "You had the chance to be my son when I needed you most. And you chose greed instead. You wanted my house, my money, my jewelry. You almost had my life. But you lost something far greater, Daniel." He swallowed hard, his eyes glistening. "What?" "My trust." He flinched as though struck. For a moment, I almost softened. Almost. But then I remembered the nights of agony, the way he had blocked the door, the way he had whispered threats instead of comfort, and the softness hardened into steel. "Get out," I said firmly. "And don't come back until the courts tell you otherwise." His eyes widened. "You'd really do this to me? To your own flesh and blood?" I felt my lips curve into a small, cold smile. "You did it to yourself." He stood there, trembling with rage and despair, before finally turning on his heel and storming out once more. That night, as I lay in the quiet hospital room, I realized something profound. The boy I had raised was gone. The man who remained was a stranger, one who had chosen betrayal over love, greed over family. But I also realized something else. I was not powerless. For weeks I had been trapped, cornered, treated like a pawn. But now, the truth was on my side, and the law was in motion. Daniel's empire of lies was collapsing, and I would be the one to watch it fall. The day I left the hospital, the world looked sharper, clearer. The sun was too bright, the air too crisp, every sound too vivid. Perhaps it was the antibiotics still running through my veins. Or perhaps it was the knowledge that I had survived not just the illness, but my son's betrayal. Claire insisted on driving me home. Her little sedan felt like a sanctuary as it rolled down the familiar streets. "You don't have to go back there yet," she said softly. "You can stay with me." I missed. I shook my head. "Number, this is my home. He needs to see that I'm not afraid to walk back through that door." She glanced at me, worry etched on her face. "And what if he's waiting?" I smiled faintly. "Then it's time he learned the truth." When we arrived, Daniel's car was already in the driveway. My heart clenched, but I forced myself to keep walking, leaning on Claire for support as we entered the house. He was in the living room, pacing like a caged animal. When he saw me, he froze. "Mom," he said, his voice brittle. "You shouldn't be here yet. You're too weak." "I'm strong enough," I replied, my tone firm. "Strong enough to end this." He frowned, confusion flickering in his eyes. "And what?" "This charade," I said, lowering myself into the armchair. "All of it." Claire handed me a folder. Holden's folder thick with documents. I opened it slowly, deliberately, letting Daniel watch every movement. "You thought you won," I said, my voice steady. "You thought you had forced me into giving you everything. But here's the truth, Daniel. Everything you pushed me to sign means nothing." His eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out the trust papers, sliding them across the table. "This is what you didn't know. Years ago, your father and I created a trust. The house, the accounts, the valuables, all of it has been protected for more than a decade. Nothing I signed in the last month changes that. You own nothing. Not a penny, not a brick of this house." His face went pale, his hands curling into fists. "You're lying." "Am I?" I asked calmly, pulling out another paper. This is the legal record. Holden filed it years ago. Irrevocable, unbreakable. Your lawyers can try all they want, but they'll never touch it. He snatched the paper from the table, scanning it frantically. His lips moved silently as he read, his eyes darting over the signatures, the seals. His hands trembled. This can't be. It is, I said firmly. Every call you made, every threat you whispered, every paper you shoved in front of me, it was all worthless. You wasted your time. And worse, you revealed yourself for who you really are. Claire stood behind me, her arms crossed, her gaze unflinching. We both heard what you said, Daniel. The paramedics heard it too. You weren't trying to protect her. You were trying to steal from her. Daniel's face contorted, rage boiling to the surface. You think you can take this away from me after everything I've done for this family? What have you done? I demanded, my voice rising for the first time. You let me writhe in agony while you circled like a vulture. You cared more about money than my life. You nearly killed me. His jaw clenched. I was trying to secure my future. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on his. And you lost it. All of it. Because of your greed. You don't just lose the house, or the accounts, you lose me. You lose the right to call yourself my son. Silence followed, heavy and suffocating. His chest rose and fell rapidly, his eyes darting between me and Claire. He looked like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, realizing too late that the ground beneath him was crumbling. Finally, his voice cracked. So what now? You're going to… what? Drag me into court? Ruin me? I exhaled slowly. No, Daniel. You ruined yourself. But yes, the law will take its course. Holden is already preparing the filings. Attempted exploitation. Coercion. Abuse. Whatever the courts decide, you'll have to face it. He staggered back a step, his face drained of color. You'd do that to your own son? I held his gaze, unflinching. You stopped being my son the moment you chose greed over love. Claire placed a hand on my shoulder. You should go, Daniel. Before the police decide to knock on your door themselves. For a moment, he stood there, trembling with rage and despair, his mouth opening and closing like a man drowning. Then, without another word, he spun on his heel and stormed out, the door slamming behind him. The sound echoed through the house. But this time it didn't shake me. It freed me. When the silence returned, I leaned back into the chair, exhaustion washing over me. Tears burned my eyes, but not from weakness. From release. It's over, I whispered. Claire knelt beside me, her hand gripping mine. No, Margaret. It's just beginning. He'll face the consequences now. And you'll finally be free. I nodded slowly, letting the weight of her words settle. Free. For the first time, in weeks, maybe years, I felt it. That night, as I lay in my own bed for the first time since the hospital, I thought about Robert. About the foresight he had shown, about the safeguards we had built. He had protected me even after death, and I silently thanked him for it. And then I thought about Daniel. My son. My betrayer. The boy I had once cradled in my arms. Now a man who had nearly ended my life for a deed and a bank account. Grief washed through me, sharp and bitter. But beneath it, there was strength, because Daniel thought he had broken me. But the truth was, he had forged me into something harder. The days after Daniel's departure passed, like a slow, healing tide. The silence in the house was no longer suffocating. It was soothing, restorative. No heavy footsteps pacing the hallway, no slammed doors, no papers shoved in front of me demanding signatures. For the first time in weeks, I could hear myself think, and yet, beneath that peace, lingered a wound far deeper than the one stitched across my abdomen, the wound of betrayal. I had always believed that, no matter how selfish, No matter how reckless, Daniel was still my son, that a bond of blood would hold, even when tested. But I had learned the hard way that blood alone doesn't guarantee love. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him again standing in the living room, his face cold, telling me I didn't need a hospital, his voice echoing, "You'll be fine. Just sign the papers." I shivered, not from fever this time, but from the memory of that cruelty. Holden came by a week later with updates. Claire sat beside me at the dining table, her presence still my anchor. "It's moving quickly," Holden explained. "The courts don't take these cases lightly. The documentation of your illness, the medical reports, Claire's testimony, even the paramedic statements, it all paints a very clear picture. Daniel may face charges." I nodded, my hands folded neatly in front of me. "And the trust?" "Secure," he assured. "Irrevocable means irrevocable. He can rage all he wants, but the law won't bend." Claire smiled, a touch of triumph in her eyes. "So it's finally over." I exhaled slowly. Yes, at least legally. But inside, I knew. A courtroom could never erase the scar left by a son's betrayal. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch wrapped in a shawl, I saw Daniel's car slow as it passed the house. He didn't stop, didn't get out. Just drove by, his face shadowed behind the windshield. For a moment, my heart lurched, the mother in me, still searching for the boy I once knew. The boy who used to run down this very street with scraped knees, waving at me from his bicycle. But that boy was gone. In his place was a man blinded by greed, undone by his own choices. And I realized that as much as it hurt, it wasn't my job to save him anymore. The nights grew quieter. My body slowly regained strength, though the scar across my abdomen would remain as a reminder. Sometimes, I traced it with my fingertips, thinking of how close I had come to death, not just from the ruptured appendix, but from the son who refused to save me. And yet, there was also gratitude. Gratitude for Robert, whose foresight had shielded me even after he was gone. Gratitude for Claire, whose courage had been the lifeline I desperately needed. Gratitude for my own resilience, the quiet strength I had doubted, but which had carried me through. I often asked myself, where did Daniel go wrong? Was it my fault? Did I give too much, too little, or at the wrong time? Could I have steered him differently, raised him better, guided him away from this path? The questions haunted me, but each time, I came back to the same truth. Love cannot cure greed. Some flaws aren't planted by a parent's hand, but by a soul's choices. And Daniel had chosen. One evening, Claire brought over tea and sat with me as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "You did the right thing," she said firmly, watching my face. I nodded, though my heart still wavered. "It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like loss." "Because you're a mother," she replied gently. "Mothers don't win when their children fall. But you protected yourself. You honored the life you've built. That matters." "I do." Her words sank deep, soothing the ache inside me. Weeks later, Holden called with the final update. The court dismissed Daniel's filings. The trust stands, and he has no legal claim. It's done. I thanked him, my voice steady. But after hanging up, I sat in silence, staring at the papers in my lap. It was done. And yet, it would never be undone. Now, as I sit here writing these words, I realize this isn't a story about property or money. It isn't even about betrayal. It's about survival, not just of the body, but of the spirit. Daniel tried to break me. He tried to trap me in my weakest moment, to strip me of everything I had earned, even of my life. But he failed. And in failing, he taught me something I never expected to learn at this age. Sometimes the people closest to you can be the most dangerous. Sometimes, the ones you love most are the ones you must guard yourself against. But he also taught me something else, something more powerful, that I am stronger than I ever believed. I don't know what will become of Daniel. Perhaps he will face charges. Perhaps he will slink away into bitterness, blaming me for his downfall. Perhaps he will spiral further into the darkness he chose. But that is no longer my burden to carry. My burden is gone. My house is still mine. My life is still mine. My dignity, my spirit still mine. And that is enough. If you are reading this, perhaps you have faced something similar, a betrayal from someone you never thought capable of hurting you. If you have, you know the wound it leaves. And you know, too, that survival isn't just about living through it. It's about standing up afterward and saying, "You did not destroy me." So that is what I say now. Daniel did not destroy me. I am still here. I am still strong. And I am still Margaret Ellison.